4th, 2020, regular meeting of council to order. Councilperson Blake will give the invocation this evening.
Heavenly Father, we thank thee for this day. Help us to use good judgment in the business at hand and guide us in wisdom with a continuing sense of truth and fairness for the community we represent.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Julie, please call the roll.
Here.
Mr. Donovan.
Here.
Mrs. Dowling. Here. Mr. Kirchner.
Here.
Mr. Krieger.
Here.
Mr. Landig.
Here.
Mr. Marr.
Here.
Good evening. I want to welcome the public to the City Council virtual public meeting. If you are attending through the published WebEx link, you will notice a window open on the bottom right-hand side of the screen entitled Q&A. This window will have opened 5 minutes prior to the start of the meeting and will remain open for 10 minutes after the meeting begins for a total of 15 minutes. During that time, if you wish to address council at a later point in this meeting, please type your name, address, and the topic you wish to speak about. This is the only means for you to schedule your participation since the public cannot physically attend in person at this time. At the appropriate time during the meeting, I will recognize you and you will be unmuted. You will be permitted to make comments to council on the topic you requested to speak about. If you wish to comment on an item on the agenda, you will be recognized when that item appears on the agenda. All other comments unrelated to the agenda will be heard near the end of the meeting during the persons before council portion of the agenda. Please make your speaking request at this time, and thank you for your virtual participation. Approval of minutes. Council, you received the minutes of the regular meeting of October 6, 2020.
Move to approve. Second.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Blake.
Yes.
Mr. Donovan.
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling. Yes. Mr. Kirchner.
Yes.
Mr. Krieger.
Yes.
Mr. Landig.
Yes.
Mr. Marr.
Yes.
The minutes of the October 6, 2020 regular meeting have been approved. Public hearings, we have none. Tabled legislation, we have none. New legislation, ordinance number 20-0-079.
An ordinance amending ordinance number 20-0-047 to extend the temporary suspension of specified code limitations related to retail activities conducted from tents and other temporary structures and code limitations related to temporary events and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flipiak.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of council. So council, you will recall that earlier this year, council extended some additional authority to the planning director to allow a quick turnaround for businesses to conduct temporary events. And predominantly we were looking at outdoor dining, trying to provide some flexibility during the pandemic. That authority ended officially at the end of October. We still have some businesses that are operating under that authority, and because we are still in the pandemic, we don't expect that there'll be any meaningful changes to operations or the desire to do outside dining and other events come springtime. So we're asking council to approve, to extend that authority. The reason we're asking to do it through next October is because give someone, Ms. Mitchell extends that approval in the springtime. Businesses need to know that they can operate that way through the course of the warm weather season. So, Ms. Mitchell, did you want to add anything to that? I think it's gone pretty well.
Yeah, certainly the process for which we review these applications, we do still do a very thorough internal review. It goes through both planning, engineering, police, fire, and the city manager's office. So we make sure that we apply any appropriate conditions to any application. While it might be, again, an example of outdoor dining, it might not be something of a permanent nature in terms of protecting the public or pedestrians. It's something that's certainly enough to guarantee safe circulation on site and again allow for the business to have that flexibility just due to the constraints that we're under. So it has worked so far, and I think the businesses have responded very well.
Council, what is your pleasure?
Mr. President, if I could just ask, how many restaurants have put up tents and been able to expand their footprint, so to speak? Has it been a lot? I know I've seen a couple up by the mall area.
I would say the mall area has been our hottest area. I think the mall themselves have made a couple of requests for special events, not necessarily the dining. And then we've had BJ's is a great example.
Right.
They've had the outdoor dining. And we're working with a couple of other restaurants, not right in that immediate area, but that actually are in the process of putting tents and so forth and similar structures that we need to get them into that review process as well. So I think more temporary events have occurred, and then a couple that even canceled just because of their own circumstances, but it has been utilized.
I saw BJ's had some very nice heaters, and it looked like they were going to make a go of it over the winter. That'd be interesting to see how that works.
We had the
Still
same
gonna do it.
situation with Billy's, and I think to your point, Mr. Blake, Councilman Blake, we have it's allowed some restaurants predominantly to extend their dining service out a little bit further to try to get some more volume. And a lot of businesses have been able to survive because they've been able to seat people outside. And we'll see how many people attempt it through the colder winter months, but there's some thought about that.
Those are some serious heaters, so I bet you it'll work. But it is a significant investment on our parts.
But
Wish you
again,
best of luck. And
trying to do what we can to help our businesses get
Right.
through this.
exactly.
If it is cold, they could always add Eskimo pie to their menu. Council, what is your pleasure?
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Ordinance number 20-0-079 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-080.
An ordinance to authorize transfers of funds, advances of funds, and revisions to appropriations and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flipiak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Malinowski, please. David, can you unmute?
There you go. Must have been the mouse. Wasn't letting me unmute. Thank you, Mr. Filipiak. Members of council, this ordinance does quite a few bookkeeping things. Firstly, it authorizes the approval of 4 permanent cash transfers from the city's general fund that represent the city share or portion of 4 different projects as noted in the legislation. Secondly, the ordinance has 3 additional permanent cash transfers that are coming from non-general funds accounts into special revenue and GEO bond retirement funds to either close out funds or move TIF money into the city share on our street lighting project. It also has a CDBG NSP fund transfer to realign the use of funds within that program for the Headland Street projects in the future. Section 2 has 4 temporary cash advances, all from the city's general fund going into various funds, the largest being the street lighting fund. And then finally, Section 3 is a section with several appropriation revisions, largest being over $3 million to cover the appropriations to our general fund for the advances that are out there. I would recommend approval of the entire ordinance and be happy to answer any questions anybody has. Thank you.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes. Move to approve. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-080 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-081.
An ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of an international passport grant with UvaMed, Inc. and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flippia.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of council. And we're very pleased to be able to ask council to entertain this subcategory of our economic development grant. This is a small incentive that will help bring an international company to our city. And we are joined here today by Mr. John Snyder, but I'll first ask Mr. Malachek to introduce this for council.
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak. UvaMed is a company that we've been having conversations with for quite some time. They have a global presence in more than 15 countries, and they're establishing their U.S. headquarters here in the city at the Matchworks building. This has been a result of a 2-year building relationship that we've had with Mr. Keith Floddington, their founder and CEO, and then obviously now Mr. Snyder, who's on the call with us here today, this is kind of the first recognition of the success of our International Trade Initiative program. It should hopefully start a pipeline of other companies that we'll have coming in as well in the future. For now, it's projecting to create 3 jobs in 2021, but then up to 11 by 2023. And we are asking for a $5,000 initial Mentor International Passport Grant. As I said, Mr. Snyder's on the call. I'm happy if he wants to say a brief word, if that's all right with Council President Landig. But if
Please
not,
proceed. Welcome, Mr. Snyder.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for the opportunity. And we're very excited about setting up our U.S. headquarters here in Mentor. I'm a former Steris alumni, spent basically all the 90s with Steris, and great to set up another company here in Mentor. And hopefully we have the great success that companies like Steris and others have had in the area. And I also want to thank Ken Filipiak and Ray Kirchner, and especially Kevin Malachek for all the hard work over the last 2 years to get us to this point. So thanks for putting this program together and considering this great opportunity.
A lot of watering, a lot of fertilizing. It's great to see some fruit. We're all welcome it.
Exactly.
Council, what's your pleasure?
Move to suspend. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes. Move to approve. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
I want to make a comment before I vote on this, and that is that I want to also thank Mr. Filipiak, Kirchner, and Malachek for the job they did. I think a lot of people on council here met Keith, the owner of the company, over at Wildwood. And we were hoping at that time that this would go the whole route and become involved within the city of Mentor, and it has. And that's a fine job for all 3 of you. And my vote is yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-081 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-082.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Penn Care Incorporated for the purchase of one 2021 Braun Chief XL ambulance and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flippia.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this is a budgeted item that will replace the unit at Station 2. Chief Searles?
Thank you, Mr. Flippia. Members of council, as you know, the 2020 budget was approved with fire levy funding for the replacement of the squad at Station 2, as the manager mentioned. That squad will then go into reserve status to replace 1172. We put a committee together again to look at a variety of squads, and Braun was selected again. As you know, we have a fleet of 9 squads, and they are all Braun. They've served us well. So a rescue squad manufactured by Braun Industries of Ohio that meets our requirements is again available for the state term schedule. The total cost is $278,570. That's $11,000 under budget. Fire levy funding funds will be used. And it's our recommendation that the city manager be authorized to enter into a contract with Penn Care for the purchase of this vehicle. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Move to suspend. Second.
I have one question for the chief. Chief, I noticed that there were some features for sanitizing. Are those additional with this purchase due to COVID, or are all models equipped with this?
They're good considerations. They're driven by COVID. What we're looking at is how we can better protect our public. So what we've done in this squad is a couple enhancements, if you will. We've made our hard surfaces easier to disinfect with less seams. We've made sure that we have good HEPA filters, and there's some disinfectant lighting that we're going to use. We're also looking at separation between the cab and the patient compartment. So COVID has had an impact on the specifications of this vehicle.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Mr. Landon, if I could add to that,
Yes, sir.
we did have some discussions about that. It did moderately add to the cost of the unit, but this will be what we do going forward on all subsequent units.
Very good. A new way of doing business. There's a motion for suspension. Please call a roll. And a second. Please call a roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes. Move to approve. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-081 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-8, no, I'm sorry. 82 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-083.
An ordinance to levy assessments for the construction of certain sidewalks in zones 1B and 1C associated with the 2019 Sidewalk Repair and Pedestrian Safety Program in the city of Mentor and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flipiak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Swicker, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Filipiak. The city sidewalk contractor, TC Construction, has completed repairs to sidewalks in zones 1B and 1C. Approximately 461 slabs of concrete sidewalk were replaced through assessment on 184 properties. Total cost for construction of assessment-related work totaled $85,026.13. That's approximately $185 per concrete slab. Administrative costs for mailing and advertising totaled $29.05 per property. The interest for each parcel being assessed has been calculated at 2% per year for 3 years. Total cost of the assessment includes the cost of construction, administrative costs, and interest, which totals $93,877.73. Approximately 60% of the parcels cited opted for assessment for the work performed by the city. Publication for the notice of assessment ran in the News Herald for 3 weeks, starting August 28th, ending September 18th, as required by the Ohio Revised Code. Residents were provided 2 weeks to make objections to the estimated assessments on file with the Clerk of Council. Written objections were required to be received by 5 p.m. October 2nd. No objections were filed with the Clerk of Council. This legislation is an ordinance per the Ohio Revised Code for assessments for the construction of sidewalk over the parcel shown in Exhibit A in the ordinance. Upon council approval of this ordinance, the total assessment against each parcel of land can be paid to the Director of Finance of the City of Mentor within 30 days. After the 30-day window to pay expires, the assessment total will be sent to the Lake County Auditor for collection with the general taxes in 6 semi-annual installments over a 3-year period. Additionally, a notice will be published in the News Herald stating that such assessment has been made and is on file in the Office of the Clerk of Council for inspection by the public. Thank you.
Mr. Blake.
Ken, Dave, just a question. Are we just 4 short years away from this being completed throughout the whole entire city?
Dave, you want to answer that?
You know,
I think we're getting close, aren't we?
I guess I would have to refer to the overall map, which I can get in a minute. But I think this might be our 7th year in the process. So I think we have a few more than 4 years to go. But I can give you an answer here in about a minute.
I mean, it's not really important. I'm just looking forward to the day when this is all done and everything's repaired. and then we could just kind of move forward and just like a maintenance sort of program. And I think 2024 back in Ward 1 might be the last year. I might be wrong, but I'm just kind of keeping a countdown to completion.
Okay.
So that's the reason I ask.
I think I'm just taking a quick look at our overall map, and I'm looking at 2020, 2025. So that doesn't seem to be very far off. So yeah,
that's a year longer than what I was hoping for, but okay. That was my only comment. We are getting close.
Move to suspend. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes. Move to approve. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-083 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-084.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to award a bid contract to JTO Inc. for the Lake Overlook Road Improvements Project and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flippia.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm really happy to be able to move this forward and let council know that we're getting very, very close to coming to the end of our Headlands Road Rehabilitation Project. We have Brooksdale and a couple of other minor streets. Brooksdale is the only remaining full reconstruction out there. We did apply for OPWC grant funding for that, as we have for each of the full reconstructions, and have been successful with that, including Lake Overlook, where we received $500,000 in OPWC funds. Mr. Swigger.
Thank you, Mr. Flipiak. The Lake Overlook Road Improvements Project consists of complete roadway reconstruction using asphalt concrete pavement and concrete curbs. It also includes drive apron replacement, some walk and ramp replacement near Corduroy Road, storm sewer lateral replacements, including catch basins and manholes. Project limits will extend from Corduroy Road to Forest Road, which is about 2,600 feet in length, and a grant of $500,000 and a loan of $150,000 were secured through the Ohio Public Works Commission. 7 bids were opened on October 23rd for this project. The bids range from a low bid of $918,000 to a high bid of approximately $1,119,000. It's been determined that JTO Incorporated of Mentor, Ohio submitted the lowest total bid of $918,559. The engineer's opinion of probable construction cost was $1,100,000. A review of the bid from JTO indicates it's in conformance with all contract requirements. Therefore, recommended that a contract be awarded to JTO Incorporated, who are experienced and qualified to perform this work, in the amount of $918,559.00. Scheduled final completion date for this project is September 17th of 2021. Thank you.
Move to suspend. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes. Move to approve. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Definitely yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-084 has been approved. And can I get a thank you from Ward 4?
Thank you. Thank you.
Resolution number 20-R-125.
A resolution approving a petition for the creation of a shoreline special improvement district and for the levy of special assessments for shoreline improvement projects and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flippia.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of council. And council, you've seen in some of the managers' reports and through reports here at council meetings, just an update on the status of the interest among Lake County communities for forming a special improvement district for shoreline improvements. Back in 2018, the Ohio General Assembly approved legislation that added Lake Erie, specifically Lake Erie shoreline projects for private property owners to the list of those improvements that could be done through special assessment. So much like the ESID that I made reference to at your work session earlier, this would be a similar type of animal. And so the thinking has been among the other Lake County communities that doing this collectively was beneficial. But in order to do this collectively, all communities have to be contiguous. So if Mentor does not participate, then you're going to have two big blocks on either side of us. There are benefits of doing these things together. We have one administrative board. You can share certain costs and administrative costs, all of which ultimately are reimbursed, as all administrative costs are, through the assessment procedure. Right now, the city does not have any private property owners in the city who are petitioning for improvements. In order to commence the district and join with the others, we need to have a petition. So there is a petition attached, which is a municipally owned parcel off of Willowbrook, and I will tell you that it's not required to move forward with an improvement. We're not intending to move forward with an improvement, but this does allow us to form the SID. That is the mechanism for forming the SID, is accepting a petition. So I ask council's concurrence on that, and then if you if you approve this ordinance and we become a member of it, we have draft communications ready to go out that will alert our residents about the opportunity for them to proceed forward if in fact they want to do improvements along their property in order to take advantage of this. Happy to answer any questions. And there are 12 communities. I think I made a typo in my staff report earlier and mentioned 14 at one point, but there are 12 in total. Those include East Lake, Lakeline, Timberlake, Willoughby, Willowick, North Perry, Painesville Township, ourselves, Mentor on the Lake, Perry Township, Fairport Harbor, and Madison Township.
Move to suspend. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marr?
Yes. Move to approve. Second.
Mr.
Please
Blake?
call the roll.
Yes.
Sorry. Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marr?
Yes.
Resolution number 20-R-125 has been adopted. Second reading, ordinance number 20-O-075.
An ordinance amending the code of ordinances, the codified ordinances of the City of Mentor 2006 as amended, sections 1127.01, 1161.01, and 1161.04 to modify regulations and add definitions related to outdoor storage and display of goods and materials in commercial, industrial, and other zoning districts.
Mr. President, I ask that we go to a third reading with this.
Second. Call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marr?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-O-075 has received its second reading. Third reading, none. Manager's report. Mr. Flippia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, I'm happy to report that we had no incidents on trick or treat. Everything went safely, and seemed like most of our residents did a really great job of protecting themselves and the public through proper precautions. So we're very appreciative of that. City's 2020 yard waste collection program will end the week of December 14th. The program will begin again in the spring with the first full week of April 2021. Council, we will be moving ahead with bids for the Marina Bulkhead replacement project for this year. Again, it's our desire to move forward incrementally each year. So this November yet, we will be advertising for bids for completion in March. And we're going to continue along Dock D and along that same area that we did last year about this time. Final paving on Center Street was completed on the 23rd of October, and striping will continue this week. And a little bit we'll finish up in the next coming weeks, but that project will be closed out shortly. Bell Meadow reconstruction paving was completed on Tuesday, November 3rd. So we're just doing tree lawn and final restoration with that. Some of that work will be done in the spring. Parks and Recreation, couple of announcements out of Park and Recreation. The Mentor Marina closed its operations October 31st. We did have a very good season out there, and we're in the process of winterizing the marina. Public access is still allowed out there through the pedestrian gates. We remind residents if they want to still continue to walk in the cold weather. We did have some damage to the pavilion at Walsh Park in the last large storm event last Sunday, so we're working with our insurance company to get that repaired. Also want to just welcome some new businesses to town. Dynamite Dogs at 6312 Center Street. Of course, Uvamed, now doing business at 8500 Station Street. Cardinal Inc. at 7850 Menor Avenue. Box HIT, or HIT, at 7471 Tyler Boulevard. Ross Dress for Less at 7841 is now open. And the following at 8140 Norton Parkway in our newest medical office building out there, Macy Family Dentistry, Ophthalmic Physicians, Inc., and Tesaro Endodontic Group are all doing business there. So we thank them for their investment and for their relocation and continued business in the city. Wish them great success. And then, Council, the last thing I have is that we would invite you to a work session 2 weeks from yesterday on the 17th to discuss the municipal budget for 2021. If that's good.
Landy? Yes. Mr. Flippia, how big of a heads up are we going to give the marina people on the refurbishing of the walls to move their stuff? I know
they've already been notified early. They've already been notified, and in fact, Mr. Kaminsky informed me today that transition is going very well. So no issues. We did have some issues last year. We improved on our process.
Thank you.
Clerk's correspondence, Julie.
Nothing to report.
Commission committee reports, meeting minutes, Board of Building and Zoning Appeals, September 8th, 2020. Tree Commission, September 14th, 2020. Council, old business. Hearing none. New business.
Mr. President?
Yes, Councilperson Dowling.
I don't want to get into rehashing all of the turmoil of the past of the Menor Lagoons. So I'm just going to fast forward to 2017 when a very positive thing happened. The debt was satisfied. And we also saw a huge increase in interest in waterfront activities, investment in the Lake County area and other marinas. And we saw the necessity that we need to be able to update. So that brought us to 2 ballot issues that were on the ballot yesterday. And the first one was the issue 1 about accepting a grant for a handicap accessible boardwalk in the preserve. And the second was an issue to just loosen up some of the restrictions on the marina and the management of it while still protecting the marina from being sold or any residential development happening there. A PAC was formed by residents, and it was led by Ron Wassam, who was the chairman, and Emily Koenig, who was the treasurer, and basically like a creative director for the website. And they wanted to promote the issues and try to correct any of the misrepresentations of the past. Menor Lagoons for All was created, and it was formed with the mission statement of a fresh start. They did a great job of answering questions and calming the fears of the residents. Both issues passed by a huge margin, and I personally look forward to a fresh start. More amenities for the residents and our boating customers. The administration has a very talented staff, and I look forward to hearing their ideas on how we should go forward and the ideas of my colleagues on council. The residents can be assured that we're all very cognizant of COVID and the effects on the economy, and they can be assured that that will be in the forefront of our minds on any development going forward. So in 1996, I remember the vote, and the public was promised access to the lake. I personally don't think that that has happened for the average resident, people that were not voters. So I'm hoping that the passage of this will provide that, we'll be able to do it. And I want to thank all the residents for their support, overwhelming support of this issue going forward, and their trust. And I've also enjoyed all of the spirited discussions that I've had with residents during this process, and I'm sure that many of you have had the same. So I just want to express my appreciation for the trust that the residents have put in council and the administration going forward.
And Jan, I want to thank you for driving that ship. Thank all of council for your support on that issue, literature drops and all. And I think with the presidential election and near record turnout, the clarity that we gave the issue for some people who had never even thought about it and considered it, hitting them for the first time, that clarity and information that was abroad, that's why it was just surprisingly and overwhelmingly approved 3-1.
Well, you know, that's 23, 24 years ago since this whole thing started. There's an awful lot of new residents in Menor that really understood nothing about how we got to where we are today. So I think that the PAC did a great idea in explaining the history, leaving the negativity out, and just looking forward to the future. And as I said, a fresh start. So.
Great job. Any other new business?
Mr. President?
Yes.
Just to add to that, just to let council know, we have applied for a grant for phase 2 of the boardwalk development. So we can go forward knowing that we can build it.
Yes, that's awesome.
I'm sure Stephanie can leave off voter approval required. Okay. Where are we?
Mr. President,
Yes.
there's no persons before council. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn into executive session to discuss collective bargaining negotiations.
Yes, thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Okay. Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger? Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Council, I would move that we go back in a regular session.
So moved.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Council, I'd make a motion to approve the 2021 regular meeting schedule with the following changes. Cancel the July 20th and August 3rd meetings to allow for council summer break. Move the November 2nd meeting to Wednesday, November 3rd due to the conflict with Election Day. And finally, cancel the December 21st meeting due to the holiday season.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Move to adjourn.
Second.